Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this episode of the Love and Larry podcast. Today's podcast is with heavy hearts as we discuss the current situation of the death and killing of Alex Pretti, an ICU nurse in Minnesota, over the course of this weekend. Today, we are honored to be joined by Dr. Teddie Potter, a clinical professor and honorarium of the University of Minnesota. She was the first inaugural director of the planetary health program there to lead for significant change around the impacts of the world to the future of human health. Dr. Potter, thank you for being here and joining us.
And thank you for inviting me.
Marion, in the course of the last 24 hours, the world has sort of changed on its heads with the things that are going on in Minnesota, especially in the world of nursing. Dive in. Let's talk a little bit about the state of today and why we're having Dr. Potter join us.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all seen it now. Things that we really personally wish I hadn't seen, but the videos of Alex, trying to help another protester in Minnesota, getting pepper sprayed, getting beaten down, and then being literally executed by ICE agents in broad daylight. It is an injustice for anyone to be harmed and to be murdered in public with no cause whatsoever. I mean, it's just been really hard to process. And so this was a nurse. And I think this really highlights now US citizen, white male nurse. The extent to which right now our country is under attack by DHS ICE agents, and how unsafe it is for communities in that city, but for communities all across the country. Just 2 days ago, ICE was in Northeast Philadelphia, trying to pick up families and children. Teachers had to drive children home so that ICE agents would not grab them. So this is going on all over the country. Minnesota is what looks to be the powder keg and the epicenter right now. But we're here to talk about what that means to nursing, what that means to nurses, and how, as a collective voice and power, we can really highlight what's going on. And so, Teddy, really happy to have you here with us today, and sharing your thoughts. Thank you so much.
Dr. Potter, you are on the front grounds of what's going on in Minnesota. Can you just sort of, yesterday, the reason we reached out and we're wanting to speak to you is you were one of the first voices that we saw on LinkedIn speak out. Can you talk a little bit about what prompted you to go in and take a status and actually share your thoughts on what was going on and from what you're witnessing in Minnesota today?
Sure. And I didn't realize this was going to be video until just a few minutes ago. So I have to apologize if I take a Kleenex and dab my eyes because this is very emotional and very, very hard for all of us right now. But when things are hard, nurses don't back down. We lean in. That is who we are. That's who we've always been. And so I really wanted to reach the heart of the nurses around the nation and also globally. I've got nurses coming in and weighing in from all over the globe, talking about their support and how they feel that things need to change and that human rights need to be honored and recognized. And so, part of the putting a post in was leaning in to say, "This is not a moment to back down. This is a moment to use whatever skills and abilities we have to serve the greater good."
And, Dr. Potter, what do you see as what should nurses be thinking and doing at this point in time? I think as our profession, right, we were taught to always advocate for others, to heal and alleviate suffering and to protect others. And from what we witnessed there, I think Alex was living our mission in that moment to be an observer in that time and to bring that element of nursing. And in a prior conversation that we had discussed before this podcast, you had mentioned there was a term referred to as a code white in which nurses had instilled in past practices. And could you tell us a little bit about what is a code white, where it came from, and maybe why now is a time to sort of rectify that term on behalf of our profession as we stand at moments of what is going on in our country?
Well, I've been a nurse for 47 years, and so things were
in some ways very similar, but also very different when I first started nursing. And we actually did wear white. And the first year I was out nursing, we actually wore caps. Thankfully, those went away very quickly after that. But the hierarchies in healthcare were extremely oppressive with a lot of patriarchy. And it wasn't just male physicians treating nurses poorly, it was female physicians also treating nurses poorly. And really, the whole culture was, "Oh, doctor, here, I'll give you my chair for you. Is there anything I can get for you?" And if you didn't, act subservient and you disagreed with them, you were oftentimes called on the spot and, verbally humiliated. And so the nurses got pretty smart. We, called code whites, and it wasn't over a loudspeaker announcement, it was just password of word of mouth to nurses on a unit. And when a code white was occurring, the nurses would gather and circle around the abusive physician, berating the nurse or taking the nurse down, and just stand in silence. Absolute standing in silence in our power. And that pause button, that non-violent pause button, in a way, gave the space for the person who was being abusive to pause also and think, "Is this what I wanna be known for?" And very, very often they left. They just left the scene. Now, is that condoning, violence? Absolutely not. Is it but it's just the power of being observers, non-violent observers, and calling people to remember their humanity. So Alex, as far as I can tell on the videos and what we've seen and what we've heard, was doing that. He was participating as a non-violent observer and reaching out to the people around him. "Are you okay?" That was his final act, was reaching out to the woman who was by his side. "Are you okay?" And so this is nurses' moment to, our scrubs are different colors, obviously, right now. We don't wear the caps, but we can still let code white be our rallying cry that when we see things that are wrong, call a code white and gather around and be an observer to remind people of their essential humanity.
And there are so many ways for us as individuals, but also as organizations to do that in this day and age. I mean, social media is a great way to call out atrocities that we're seeing in the world. People have just different levels of comfort and risk they're willing to take. And so I think letting everybody know that we need you in the profession to call code white, as you said, but to do it in ways that you feel comfortable with. And so, as we go through this podcast, I'm going to be scrolling things on the bottom. You can call your senators. That's really important. Let them know you do not agree with what's going on. You can sign on to petitions. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. We just put out like 20 minutes ago a petition for nurses and nurse leaders and organizations to sign on to. And then finally, you can show up. And there are a lot of ways to show up, both right now in the moment, but also in May for the Report for Duty rally focused on bringing nurses together in DC.
And I think that's to the point of what Marion's saying. It's just the importance of not being silent in this moment. There's no words and often for what we're witnessing, but by showing up, the silence is complicity in many situations, and it allows for behaviors to continue going on if we remain silent. There was a very famous statement, and we all are reflecting on where our world is going. But I remember listening recently to someone talking about the state of World War II, and he said if there were 9 people sitting at a table who were not doing anything, but there was one Nazi at the table eating, all people by association were there for a Nazi because they were not speaking up. And interestingly, during World War II, there were five classifications of why these rose to power. There was the rescuer and the resistors, there were upstanders and bystanders, and perpetrators. Now, Nazis were about 3% of the population, only 3%, and that made up all the perpetrators. Where rescuers and resistors were actually in only the couple thousands. But what was very interesting is what they said was that most of Europe, though, 90% of people were just bystanders.
Mm.
And what that meant is they just observed without doing anything. And if we had simply moved more of that 90% into upstanders, speaking out, writing an article, calling their senator, making a social media post, standing in place to be a silent observer, we could have reversed much of the worst of what had happened in the Holocaust. And I think that is why we feel so called to be here with you as one of the great nursing leaders of our generation, Teddy, in this moment to say, this is our time not to remain silent. And nurses across history have always been at the forefront of some of the biggest shifts in our culture to stand by humanity. And we are needed now, and we can't be silent. And please go on.
That's exactly right. Everything you've been saying is so accurate and so true. What I want to challenge nurses to avoid is falling back into this hierarchical thinking that it's more important for me to get pepper sprayed than to serve meals. There is no hierarchy to service. There is no hierarchy. If you are doing good, if you are spreading love, if you are challenging these systems that are so horrific, any action is moving a different future forward, a better future forward. So I urge people, I call people to do what you can do, what aligns with your spirit, but do something. Don't stay just sitting there and looking as a passive observer. Whatever you can do, blow your whistle, serve a meal, watch children, make sure they're protected when they are picked up from school. Speak, write, send op eds, call telephone calls. All of us can do something, and I urge us to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important, and it's something that we push a lot on this podcast. And there are a lot of barriers for individuals to engage. I think there are even more barriers sometimes for nurses to engage. And so to be able to not only have sort of the global permission to do so, but to feel, in a space where there are others at levels like yours to say, this is what we need you to do. It's okay to be doing it. It's okay to be doing it in the way that you need to do it. I will say one thing. This is going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be uncomfortable. We are in very, very uncomfortable, uncharted waters here. And so you have to be okay with feeling a little uncomfortable and taking the risks that you're able to take to stand up for your community, your colleagues, your patients, etc. Because those are the times we live in right now. And that's the profession that we are. We have a moral and ethical obligation to do that.
And for many of us, nursing is not a job, it's a calling. It's who we are. And so I also urge nurses to not compartmentalize of here's the times I'm nursing and the rest of the days, the week, the evening, the hours I'm not nursing. This is nursing to work on behalf of a better society, a society where all people have access to health care, where no one is harmed, where children can grow up without fear. That is as nursing can get. And so I really want people to realize that this is a call to you to step in your fullness out of the shadows, out of any box that you've sort of adopted where you just say, I'm just a nurse. Are you kidding? Nurses are just the source of love and power. Let's use it for the good. Let's use it for the good.
Teddy, what you're saying here, darkness consumes darkness, and it is only through love and light that you can beat back darkness. And what you're saying here makes me so proud to be a nurse. What you said is we became here because we wanted to make the world better, and we sacrifice so much of ourselves, the nurses on the front line, constantly caring for others when they don't, that this profession, to your point, we can't box it into a time stamp of a week. but every action that we can put out there in the universe can create other change that we want to see in the world. And there are 5 million nurses in the United States, the largest profession, not only in healthcare, but the largest profession in the United States. And we span every community across this country. And together, I believe so fundamentally that nurses are the moral compass often in our nation to do what is right. And I think that's what we're talking about here is just do something. Just be the nurse and this world we can make better.
Well, and think about your practices. In, as I said, 47 years, that's a long time. I have cared for a lot of people that I didn't like. I have cared for a lot of people. I have changed their bandages. I've started their IVs. I've helped them walk. I've done their basic cares when I took them to the bathroom. I did not like them, but I loved them. And that's what we are being called to right now, is to draw upon that sense of what makes us nurses, that sense of love for human and being a planetary health nurse for the entire ecosystem, but all humans. That means, and some people might be very uncomfortable with that, that means try to find the humanity in those who are serving ICE and those who are in Border Patrol. That's not pleasant. That's not I don't like what they're doing. I don't like it at all. It's horrific. It's evil. But can I find that one person who still has a heart of humanity and begin to bring them over?
And I think you're absolutely spot on. And I think our humanity at the end of the day is what is on testament in the moments of time that we're facing. And I think as Marion's saying, what we've seen even in the last 24 hours is what I normally run against in nursing is this epiphany of silence, this echoing, deafening silence to stand up on really hard issues. And yesterday we started to see a glimmer of that change. Social media started to take out. And then as of this morning, we are seeing nearly every single nursing association in the country has come out with some kind of statement to condemn the actions of what has happened and call for due process and action of the law. The Minnesota Nurses Association, the American Nurses Association, Washington, Massachusetts, state after state is stepping forward. And I only think that is happening because people of nursing are standing up, speaking out, putting out their voices, calling that our profession takes action in this moment. And what I would say to anyone listening is it doesn't matter how small that action feels to you, collectively that changes things. The biggest fear anybody wants in an authoritarian government is for people to unite together in a commonality of shared humanity to push back on the worst aspects of society. And we are seeing it happen. And for me, this is the one singular moment I have ever been a nurse that I am seeing this seemingly stance between Republicans and Democrats, nurses of all different backgrounds saying what is happening here is wrong and we are better as humans than this moment. And we call for justice. Marion, tell us about this petition that I know a group of grassroots nurses have spent the last 12 hours working to put together under your leadership. Tell us a bit about this.
So yeah, this was took place rapidly, and it is in partnership with a number of nurses, but Nurse Shift Change is the one who is sponsoring this through the Action Network site. So I want to thank them for taking that leadership in getting this up on the Action Network. But yes, there are a bunch of us who really feel strongly that we want to encourage all of our nurses and leaders of, like I said, professional nursing organizations and regulatory bodies, as well as our local, state, and federal lawmakers, and of course, the Department of Homeland Security, to really begin to immediately reform their practices and policies and to start protecting the public from harm to health, harm to education, harm to social well being that's all being caused by this current federal immigration enforcement practices, as seen yesterday in Minneapolis by the murder of Alex Pretti. And so we just released a petition that we're asking nurses, healthcare providers, nurse leaders, organizations, individuals, allies, anyone, to please sign. We're going to collect signatures for, I don't know, as long as we can. And then we're going to send them to those places that I mentioned, our lawmakers, our nursing organizations, Department of Homeland Security, etc. I think we
And the
feel
time is now,
strongly
Marion, right? And
that,
also I think the timing, because we know as of this week, our Senate is focusing on actual DHS funding that currently has no restrictions over their scope of delivery and how they engage with American citizens. And it's time that that changes. So I think the time is, if you want to sign this petition, the more people who take action today, tomorrow, before the end of this week, so we can get this to our senators to say, we as a nation of nurses stand and demand that Department of Homeland Security puts in safeguards as it deals with the population of the US citizens and others, that we make sure we process due process and protect the American public from rogue directions that are clearly causing the loss of life in this nation.
and I just want to say, we were talking about everybody has to do something. Signing this petition, adding your name to it, that is one of the things you can do to help show that this really is an issue that is affecting all of us and that we as a profession, as individuals, feel very strongly about. So I've already posted it on LinkedIn. You can go to our LinkedIn pages to find the petition. We've sent around the link multiple times on here. I'll put it up one more time. And you can also go to Nurse Shift Change's website as well. Again, they're the ones sponsoring the petition on the Action Network, and we thank them for that as well. We need your voices, whether that's through signature, whether that's on social media, whether that's showing up at protests and rallies, organizing, like Teddy said, making meals, mutual aid, watching children, whatever you can do. There's no lack of ways to help and get involved. Reach out. We can help you figure out what you are most comfortable doing.
And Teddy, thank you for spending this part of this very busy day for you with all that's going on in Minnesota. What last words would you want to share with those nurses and others who are listening in today to take back with them and share with their networks?
Like to share a story, one of my favorite stories about Nelson Mandela when he's in prison in Robeson Island, and they were out in a chain gang chopping the stones, and they would make use of that time. They would, if somebody was a teacher of chemistry, he'd teach all the people about chemistry, and if somebody was a cook, they'd teach about cooking, and so they used the time to teach each other. And one day, somebody said, "Stop! Stop! Stop! The guards are listening." And Nelson Mandela's response was, "Yes, but they too need to learn because they will be citizens of the future we're creating." And that's what I want us to remember as nurses. We are building a future that where our children and grandchildren can thrive. And let's get out there, do the work, and bring in as many people we can with the love that nurses do so well.
It's a beautiful story. Thank you.
Teddy, thank you for joining us. And please let us know how we can help in the hours and days to come.
For everyone who tuned in, this is just the start, not the end. And for each of us to take a step forward collectively, we can change the future for the better. Dr. Teddie Porter, thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to the work you accomplish. And to everyone who's listened, we look forward to seeing the steps that and actions you take to make a better future.
And I just want to say to Alex's family and his colleagues, we send our condolences.